Conspiracy theories. They're all crazy, right? Well, maybe not. There's some history as to why so many believe in them. What we really need is a conspiracy theory detection kit, and that's what we have in this episode. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Shermer. Dr. Shermer is the founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine, the host of the Science Salon Podcast, and a presidential fellow at Chapman University, where he teaches Skepticism 101. For 18 years, he was a monthly columnist for Scientific American. He's the New York Times bestselling author of Why People Believe Weird Things, and his latest book is Giving the Devil His Due, Reflections of a Scientific Humanist. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope I'm not easy prey for you.
I'm sure you're not.
I don't even know what that means. What does that mean, easy prey?
Well, there's things that we do that really make us vulnerable to hackers, to scams, to people trying to convince us stuff that's not true. And that there's things that we could do to prevent ourselves from falling victim to those, either it's thought processes or those types of people who want to do bad to us.
Yeah, that's the connection to my work. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, much of what I do, I guess, has to do with teaching people not to be prey to bad ideas. To what's the expression? Reasons that sound good as opposed to good sound reasoning. Yes. Yeah. It's a good phrase. Yeah, that's right.
Can you give us a little background as to how you came to where you're at and what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So as you can see in the backdrop there, my magazine is Skeptic Magazine. It's a quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society. We're a 501c3 nonprofit science education organization. We're devoted to teaching critical thinking, skepticism, scientific reasoning, rationality, and all that. And, you know, if I wanted to paint the biggest picture, it would be that none of us are omniscient. We can't know anything with certainty. So most of what we do in life, including most of the decisions we make, are made under uncertainty. So how best should we make decisions and choices in our lives about anything, from shopping to marriage to job, career, to which religion, which political party, how should you vote, whatever, anything, has to be based on some kind of algorithm or method or something that's beyond just what I felt like doing today, just random guessing, right? And so it turns out that for centuries, really since the scientific revolution, we've developed certain tools and methodologies, technologies to work around this problem of uncertainty. So, the scientific method, for example, is designed in a way to sort of tease out causality. That is, what causes what, so Hume famously defined causality as constant conjunction. A happens, then B happens, A, B. So we intuitively think, well, A is causing B. And a lot of times that's true. So that's good. But say the rooster crows and the sun rises, that happens every day. But, we would be foolish to think, well, the rooster crowing is causing the sun to rise. So Hume's, sort of addendum to that was the counterfactual theory of causality. That is, if you counterfactually prevent the rooster from crowing, does the sun still rise? Oh, it does? Okay, then it wasn't the rooster after all. So really, it's kind of a silly example of what scientists do when they control variables. So like the randomized controlled experiment we've all heard about with vaccines and drugs and things like that. The whole point is that we want to know for certain if this drug can do what the pharmaceutical company says it can do, or is it some placebo effect, or is it some artifact of something else? Or maybe a more familiar example to your listeners would be like, which diet should I go on? And well, I read that the people that did this diet, they lost this amount of weight and they had this health improvement measures. Yeah, maybe it might be the diet, but it could be that they also changed their sleep pattern. They also stopped drinking and smoking. Maybe they started exercising more. Maybe it's one of those and not the diet, or some combination, right? So controlling all those variables is, kind of is a larger theme. Is what we're trying to do is understand, the cause of things, what the hell is going on. And, the more you go into bigger subjects like economics, or political systems, it gets super messy. right? So when you get into hot button issues like, are the racists are police all racist, or does to what extent should markets be free? Well, it depends on what you're trying to measure and what all the other variables are, So you'll see things like, liberal democracies are better than autocracies, on these 12 measures. Well, that's true, but some autocracies do better at certain things like law and order, maybe, because they have such rigid political control systems, right? So much of it then gets super messy in the social sciences when it merges into the political sciences. But the whole idea is, we're just trying to understand what causes what.
That's a great explanation, that it separates the correlation.
Yeah.
Just because things happen at the same time doesn't necessarily mean that one caused the other.
Yeah, it's like the vaccines and autism thing. When that happened, this is a classic case of anecdotal thinking. I got my kid vaccinated, and a couple weeks later, he started acting weird. I took him to a doctor a few months later after that, and he was diagnosed with autism. What's the last thing we did that was out of the ordinary? Oh, we got those vaccines. Oh, A happened, then B happened. Well, it turns out there's no causal connection. And the one paper that said that there was retracted as fraudulent. But nevertheless, people still glom onto that one. And, but there's nothing special about that. I mean, does hydroxychloroquine work or does it not work for COVID-19? It doesn't. But for a while, we thought it did. I tried it for 2 days and then thought, this makes me feel like crap. I'm not taking this stuff just as a preventative measure. Who knows? And, but that was a perfect example in current events of, there was a little bit of evidence that it might. Okay, let's run some experiments. Let's try this and try that. Nope, doesn't. Okay, move on to the next thing. Remdesivir or whatever that is. And, now he's still new things after that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those times that we're living in where there isn't a whole lot of scientific background. I mean, it's a novel virus. We don't know what it's going to do, how it's going to work, how it's going to impact with our bodies, what medications are going to work. And I guess. Yeah,
I hate the whole politicization of it as if Fauci or Trump or whoever is omniscient. Like they knew, and they should have done this. No. Rewind the tape back to January. We did not know. Remember, we did not know what was going on. Even Fauci, I love Fauci, but he's not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. Nobody does.
I mean, I like, it's kind of one of those challenges because like if you're saying people felt like you should be omniscient, you should have known that the guidance would shift.
Right.
Well, if the guidance is shifting, then you must not be correct now.
Right.
It produces a complex argument.
This is what's called the curse of knowledge. That is, once you know something, you can't not know it, and then that colors your retrospective review of what people should have done. Or so this is also called the hindsight bias. After the fact, it's clear what we should have done, but at the time, it wasn't clear. So my two favorite examples are Pearl Harbor. That is, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there was a conspiracy theory that Roosevelt knew it was coming. Or the crazier one was that he was in on it. A little bit like the 9/11 truthers, and I'll use that as a second example. And so, retrospectively, Roosevelt's critics dug through all the intel and said, "Oh, look, there was a memo here and a memo here and a memo here, clearly indicating the Japanese were going to attack Hawaii." But what they're forgetting is that there was like 10,000 pieces of intelligence over 10 years that they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Who knows? Nobody knew. And it wasn't at all clear. In fact, there was so much intel, they stopped sending it to Roosevelt because he was getting confused and the State Department didn't know what they should be doing. Why are you sending us all this? What should we do? Well, we don't know. Right. So then after the fact, you go, oh, look at that one. That's the one. Same thing. There's that famous August 9th, 2001 memo from Condoleezza Rice to the White House saying, the intel indicates that Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda may attack the United States in the U.S. And so after 9/11, then they go, aha, August 9th, Bush knew that they were going to attack the United States. He was in on it, or he knew it was going to happen. So there's let it happen on purpose, lie hop, versus made it happen on purpose, my hop, right? So even the 9/11 truthers don't agree on that. But again, that's not fair, because again, there was like 10,000 pieces of intelligence of Al Qaeda, what they were doing all over the world, and it wasn't at all clear that that was the one they were going to do.
Yet that one piece in a mass of an ocean of information doesn't really give you that much information.
Right. Yep. Even when people make bad marital decisions, right? Did they, and the mother and the parents go, you should have known, you shouldn't have married her or him. Well, did you really know? I mean, in a way, even marital decisions are, should be grounded in some level of reason and rationality. This whole point of dating, say, for 2 years, so that anything weird comes out, because, after a few months, you just don't know. People can be on their best behavior for a while. So that's a form of data collection in a way. It sounds unromantic. And my friend Tim Minchin, the singer-songwriter, has that little funny line about, love and evidence. What's evidence got to do with love? You know what you call love without evidence? Stalking.
Oh, gee. That's a scary
But in a way, that's what unrequited love is. If you have an interest in somebody and it's not coming back, well, the coming back or not, that's information. That's data to signal to you, well, is this a hit? This is somebody I should pursue, or a miss, somebody I should not pursue. It's all that kind of signal detection theory writ large to life.
So back to 9/11 and knowing or not knowing, or being in on it or not being on it. Like there seems to be in our society, I don't know outside of the U.S., but there seems to be this almost a love for conspiracy theories, or this the underpinning, like, well, it has to be there has to be some truth behind this. Is there a science behind why people want to believe in conspiracy theories? Kind of the Fox Mulder, I want to believe.
Yes. Yeah. Scully and Mulder. That's right. It's a perfect blend of reason and emotion, or skepticism and belief. Well, so I have a teaching company course. Actually, the great course is called Conspiracies and Conspiracy Theories. They're two different things. So the conspiracy is something that actually happens. Mm-hmm. Two or more people plotting in secret to take advantage of or do something illegal or immoral to a third party. A conspiracy theory is the idea that there is something, such a thing. And so these are two different things. Conspiracies really do happen. Mm-hmm. So one reason we believe conspiracy theories is because enough of them are true. We know about nefarious goings-ons of CEOs and corporations and governments, and a day doesn't go by where somebody isn't busted for insider trading, or a big corporation like Volkswagen gets busted for cheating the emission standards, and all the shenanigans of the U.S. government in the 70s, manipulating elections in South American countries. These are all conspiracies, right? So when people say 9/11 was an inside job, okay, or a false flag operation, at some mass shooting or whatever, you start sounding like Alex Jones, who's pretty far out there for sure. But the fact is, there are false flag operations. They do happen. My favorite example of this was Operation Northwoods. That is, when Kennedy was president, the State Department was trying to figure out ways to get rid of Castro. And one of them was this Operation Northwoods. Okay, we're gonna set up a false flag operation. We make it look like the Cubans did X, and it's really us doing that. Then we have on a pretense to invade Cuba and accuse them of doing this bad thing, right? Including, making some of our airplanes look like Russian MiGs, or, this kind of thing. Or, and then have them buzz like a U.S. airport and go, oh, those Russians coming from Cuba, we have to do something about it. Now, to his credit, Kennedy rejected all these things, but there were attempts, to assassinate Castro, like a poison pin. One was you put toxins inside his wetsuit. He liked to dive. He was a diver. So you put toxins inside the wetsuit, he puts the wetsuit on, then he's poisoned. Or they even had an exploding shell, a conch, that's at the bottom of the ocean. He dives down there. These are crazy ideas, right? This is kind of like a Mission Impossible kind of stuff. And yet, again, Kennedy rejected this, but the fact that his State Department is bringing him these proposals, it's like, this is the kind of thing our government was even thinking about doing? Yeah. So during Reagan's administration, he passed that law saying, assassinating foreign leaders is illegal, and so don't be thinking about assassinating me, right? So that tells us, and we know historically that a certain percent, I think it's like 20% of all European monarchs were assassinated. That is, power changed hands from one regime to another, one party to another, violently. Mm-hmm. So it's not completely crazy to think that could happen, because it has happened, right? So that's one argument for why people believe in conspiracy theories. The other is to do with the kind of messiness of the world. And much of our cognition is designed to try to simplify things, that it's just this, it's just that. And sometimes it is something simple, but the tendency is then to think that the people in power have more power than they actually have. So, for example, political conspiracy theories are mostly promoted by the people out of power. Mm-hmm. So the party that loses concocts all kinds of conspiracy theories about the rigged election and so on. The weird thing about Trump is that he won. And he continued the conspiracy theories. It's like, dude, you won. You're supposed to drop the conspiracy theories. It's crazy. Anyway, but that again, that power differential, that CEOs or big Fortune 500 corporations have way more power than they actually have, and that they're conspiring to do this or that. I mean, for a while, it was Bill Gates was the big, demon conspiring to do things. Although he's kind of back in the news with COVID. That he's conspiring to chip everybody in the world. When they do the vaccine, they're going to put a chip in you, and Gates is going to control the world population. Right, but I'm predicting that Bezos will take over as the Antichrist, trying to take over the world because he's now the richest person. But again, the money is a proxy for power, and people feel like that there's shenanigans going on by powerful people. And again, for good reason, because powerful people that have money, they do rig the system. Mm-hmm. Again, there's good reasons for that.
I've always kind of wondered, maybe the example that I was thinking of personally was 9/11, a horrific event. And it's almost, I wonder if it's easier for people to believe, well, there was this vast conspiracy to make this event happen, rather than a handful of people from a foreign country could do something so horrific and there was nothing that we could do about it. Like, the truth is almost more unnerving and more scary because there's less control there.
Yeah, well, there's an angle there that I like, that again, back to the complexity of political and economic systems, it's easier to think that, there's just 12 people in London called the Illuminati, and they're calling the shots. They're the ones running the world. It's kind of a simplification, but also it's a way of kind of reducing cognitive dissonance or anxiety about that uncertainty, because the fact is nobody's running the world. And in a way, that's kind of scary. You'll see gas prices go up, and they have all these people on the news. And why is the gas price? Well, I think it's this, and I think it's that. Ask the gas producers. They're the ones that are jacking the price up. Ask them. Well, they don't. They're doing what these people tell them. No one seems to know. And it's like, what? No one has an understanding of the economy. That's a little scarier. No one's in charge, and that's a little disturbing.
And maybe that's the fear, is that it's easier to believe that someone bad is in charge, as opposed to no one's manning the ship, and we're all just kind of, if we bump into something, we're going to bump into it, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because the one person, the belief that one person or one group, small group, is in charge and they're evil. Well, then we just have to get rid of the evil people, then everything will be okay. So it kind of simplifies it that way too.
So is there an easy way to kind of identify pseudoscience and conspiracies that have no I would say no founding in truth, flat Earth, and things like that? I do
have my conspiracy detection kit in my course. That first of all, the more people that have to be involved, the less likely the conspiracy theory is true. As Franklin said, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. And also the more elements that have to be involved, they have to come together at just the right time and place, because the world is again, it's messy, it's chaotic, it's contingent. Things never go the way they're supposed to go. And people they don't keep their mouth shut. They do talk. We find out about these things eventually. I mean, as the joke goes, Clinton couldn't even get a blowjob in the White House, before everybody knows about it, right? Nixon couldn't even orchestrate a break-in to the Democratic hotel at the Watergate Hotel. I mean, here's the most powerful regime. He's got his top G men, G. Gordon Liddy. He's going in there. They couldn't even pull off a robbery. Come on, this is how it normally goes, right? People are incompetent. They can't keep their mouth shut. And like 9/11, the 9/11 truth movement. Okay, so depending on which version, but take the one where it was an inside job with explosive devices. And but wait a minute, we saw the planes hit. Now, let's set aside the no planers for a minute because they're completely crazy. There were no planes. Those were all holograms. Okay. All right. Even the normal 9/11 truthers have debunked the no planers, which is kind of amusing. But even with that, let's say, okay, so the planes did hit and they used explosive devices. Okay, this is impossible to have all that complexity come together that somehow the operatives got inside the World Trade Center buildings, broke through all the drywall and planted the explosive devices on the beams and so forth. And they did it in just the right place on the right floors where the planes hit, and they hit at an angle so that, you could see the collapsing videos that, it's slightly tilted at that floor where they hit so that people would have to know that in advance, which floors the planes were going to hit, and on and on and on. And what about the passengers and all those phone calls they made? You'd have to have like 10,000 people in on this with all those elements that would have to come together just the right way. Impossible, right? Because that's not how the world really works.
Yeah. So is there a kind of a risk to giving into conspiracy theories or kind of engaging with people or saying, oh, it's harmless to be a 9/11 conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
It really doesn't, it's in an isolated bubble. It has no relevance on anything else. Or do these things kind of blend into other areas?
Some of it is harmless, the flat earthers or, some of that. But some of it is harmful. I mean, some of it, like the examples of the parents that are suing Alex Jones because his followers, his nut job followers, were harassing them in their homes. I mean, just going right up to their doors and following them around to the supermarket and screaming at them and stuff, right? So there it kind of tips into the harm principle that, that where somebody is harmed, then that's bad, especially if it's not true, then it's libelous. So he got sued for that and he lost, and that was good. Or the guy that went to the ping pong pizzeria place or whatever, pizza pong or whatever that place was called.
Pizzagate.
Supposedly where Hillary was running her pedophile ring in the basement and that lunatic shows up with a gun and shoots through the roof because he thought, I'm going to bust up this pedophile ring right now. I mean, that's somebody who believes a conspiracy theory. Or much more dangerous ones are like the guy in New Zealand that shot up the mosque. He really believed the whole white supremacy conspiracy theory about the darker races are trying to outbreed the lighter races, and that people are in on this, and the Muslims are doing this, and the Jews are doing that. That goes back to really Hitler and the whole protocols of the Elders of Zion. These are all conspiracy theories. Hitler rose to power on the stab in the back conspiracy theory, that the only reason the Germans lost the First World War is because they were stabbed in the back by the Jewish interests in business that wanted to end the war sooner and blah, blah, blah. And they gave away, all this stuff. And, they're the reason we lost. And, millions of people believe that conspiracy theory, and they put them in power for it. That's an example of a dangerous conspiracy theory.
Then I guess like the pseudoscience implications are kind of similar. If you don't believe that coronavirus is a real virus, then why would you get a vaccine?
Yeah.
If you don't believe in polio or other vaccines, why would you get your children vaccines?
People are get very confused about freedom. Also, I should be free to not get vaccinated. Yeah, well, I should be free from your germs. Where the freedom for you to swing your arm ends at my nose. The harm principle, right? I mean, and it's also what people are used to. It's like here in California, people, I should be able to go into a restaurant without a mask. Well, you can't go in without shoes and a shirt. Pretty much every restaurant has no shoes, no shirt, no service. Everybody goes, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, yeah, well, okay, we're throwing a mask in there because, you might have the virus. And that's even worse than your ugly chest and your stinky feet. Right. So, or you're not free to drive on the left side of the road. Right. You give up certain freedoms for security. And people get confused about this. They think, no, I should be free to do anything I want. No, yeah, you can go live on an island by yourself and do whatever you want, but not in a civil society.
Yeah, I've seen people talking about, like the restaurant. I'm free to come into your restaurant without a mask. Well, then I'm free to have my food prep workers not wash their hands after they use the bathroom, sneeze on your food.
Right.
But if you see my employees do that, you're going to be upset and alarmed at it. So
Yeah.
There's this disconnect
right.
of like
they'll call the government to shut you down. Oh.
now, is this because there's like a political ideology and the political ideology overrides the science aspect?
Yes,
or
that's true. But of course, it doesn't happen in all Western countries. The United States is kind of an outlier in a sense, although so is Italy. So this gets me to the work of my friend and colleague, Michelle Gelfand, who's a cultural psychologist, and she studies loose versus tight cultures. That is, to what extent do the citizens of a nation follow the rules and the laws? And some are better at it, and others are not so good at it. Like Italians, where the COVID spread initially wildly, they didn't want to follow the edicts of the government that said this is what you should do. And we've seen quite a bit of that here. Mm-hmm. Though Americans were pretty good for a while, maybe March and April, May, but then in June, when it's like, okay, we're ready to open up now, and the numbers were looking good. So, and then we saw what happened, and now we're back to square one again almost. That would be an example. Whereas in Japan and Germany and a few other tighter cultures where they said, okay, we're going to do what you tell us to do in the interest of solving this problem. So there are those cultural differences. I think America's, not so good on that front.
Yeah, we can only abide by a rule so long if we don't see personal benefit to us.
Right. Yeah, well, that's right. Individualistic cultures versus more collectivist cultures. Now, the word collectivism has it's a bad connotation here. It implies socialism, communism, and so on. And I agree. I'm kind of an individualist. But, again, we give up freedoms all the time for security and for good reason. And I'm happy about that. I live a much better life where I don't have to worry about things that I would be worried about if I lived in some third world country where there were no police or the police were all corrupt and I couldn't count on the banking system, that the currency may be inflated wildly. I'd be afraid to put my money in the stock market. These are things I just don't worry about. I can think about other things because, I live in a secure, safe society because I've been willing to give up all those freedoms, certain freedoms.
We've got good water, consistent electricity because we have allowed, right. We're willing to pay taxes and we're willing to give up these other things to make that happen.
Right.
So I know that you have a book that came out in April, Giving the Devil His Due. Where in the world did that title come from? Because I know.
There he is. There's the devil. Well, I'll tell you where it came from. So the play, let me find it here from, let's see here. This is, let me get the correct dates here on that. This is Robert Bolt's 1960 play, A Man for All Seasons, based on the true story of the 16th century Chancellor of England, Sir Thomas More, in his collision with King Henry VIII over the monarch's divorce from Catherine of Aragon. In the play, a dialogue unfolds between More and his future son-in-law, Roper, over the changing of the law. Roper urges him to arrest a man whose testimony could condemn More to death, even though no laws were broken. And More says, and go he should if he were the devil himself until he broke the law. And Roper says, so you'd give the devil the benefit of law? And More says, yes. What would you do? Cut a great road through the law to get after the devil? And he said, I'd cut down every law in England to do that. And then More says, so after all the laws were cut down and the devil came after you, then where are you going to go? So I'd give the devil the benefit of law for my own safety's sake, right? So here I'm mostly talking about free speech. That is, the moment you start censoring people's speech you don't like, particularly their ideas, then what happens when you've set a precedence, or worse, even changed the laws to censor people, when it's you who are the unorthodox one, you are the heretic, you're the one that has the idea that wants to push back against the orthodoxy, you're the heterodox thinker, and then you've already signed off on censorship, so too bad. So we have to protect free speech for our own safety's sake. And so anyway, the book is a collection of my essays, mostly focused on those themes of free thought, free thinking, free speech, heterodox thinking. The problem we mentioned at the start about no one's omniscient. The only way to find out if you've gone off the rails with your ideas is to engage with other people who think differently from you, right? So if you're a liberal and you only read the New York Times, you're not helping yourself because you may have gone down a rabbit hole. You're in a bubble.
Yep.
Right. So the social media bubbles and echo chambers, as they're called. You got to get out of that to find out if the ideas you're pursuing are gone too far. And the only way to do that is talk to somebody that doesn't agree with you. And believe it or not, there are. Right. So I'm concerned about the lack of diversity of ideas and opinions and politics in the academy. And most of my fellow professors are pretty liberal. You could make jokes about conservatives pretty much unabated on campus, and people will laugh. But you can't make jokes about liberals or Democratic presidents, for example. They won't think that's funny because there's a huge bias there, and that's a problem. Again, we in the academy we're signed off on diversity as a great thing, except for diversity of opinion, viewpoint diversity.
What's the expression? I'm all for diversity as long as you agree with me.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's just, not good. Not good for, what we're trying to do here is figure out what's true.
Has there been any pushback from the book of people like, we don't want you to be talking about widening diversity? I've had mostly pretty positive response to the book. I had one negative review in The Guardian in England, but clearly by a social justice warrior. He starts off by saying, well, Shermer's an old white guy, and all the blurbs on the back of his books, by the back of his book, are by old white guys, and he lists them all. Of course, he forgets that I also had Amy Chua, who's a woman, an Asian woman, and Nadine Strawson, who was a woman who's head of the ACLU. It's like conveniently forgetting that some of the other people. So, basically, if the opening, this was the opening paragraph, and if that's your best argument, well, Shermer's an old white guy, so we can't trust him. It's like, okay, that's racist, right? And ageist. You're telling me you're a liberal. You're supposed to be against ageism and racism. And you're telling me if I'm old and white and middle age, whatever, I'm 65, whatever that is, that you can't trust me. What is that? So I found it actually rather amusing. I mean, I appreciate the stance of, we want to hear opposing ideas. We need to hear opposing ideas. We need to kind of challenge the status quo to some extent, not without science, not without reason, but the kind of that pressing against the edge of the bubble helps us all be better.
Yeah, even scientists especially really need critical feedback. I mean, it's sort of the point of peer review. But, science is not perfect. We have the so-called replication crisis. A lot of the kind of cutesy social psych experiments turn out to be not replicable. Some of them weren't even done. They were just fraudulent. More importantly, a lot of the medical science experiments and research, difficult to replicate because they're so complex. That has bigger ramifications, like when big pharmaceutical companies try to get drugs passed by the FDA and they present data. A lot of that data is not replicable. It's not good. And we're making, important decisions about what to recommend to patients with diseases, based on faulty research. So really important that scientists also get on board with, trying to debunk their own ideas, right? Be skeptical of their own theories. You got to do it.
That's got to be a hard position. There's an expression about, the best way to figure out if your argument is right is to argue against your own thoughts.
Exactly. Like I've had my students in the past, take up the opposite position. What is your position on the abortion? I'm pro-choice. Okay. What's the best arguments on the pro-life side? They hate women. No, that's not their argument. They may hate women. I don't know, but that's not their argument. Okay. So go back and do your homework. Here, watch Ben Shapiro's video on defending the pro-life position and then come back with some arguments against that. Most of them never thought about it. Right. So that's the only way to figure out.
That's really awesome. Are there any other, obviously you're not traveling.
No.
You're not doing any.
I did my entire book tour from my garage. I'm in my garage here. So, and actually I'm kind of getting used to it. I have to say, I used to like traveling and giving a lot of public talks and stuff like that. And now that I can't, and now that no one else can either, so I don't have any FOMO, no fear of missing out. Like, oh, why didn't I get invited to that conference? Oh, no. Now no one's going anywhere. I'm like, hey, this is not so bad. I get to stay home and play with my kid and ride my bike and, work on my next book and so on. And okay.
It's all that adjusting to what's the world we're currently living in and how do we make it work with us?
Well, I feel fortunate in Southern California. First of all, the weather's pretty good most of the year, so I can get out and ride my bike and stuff. It doesn't really matter how long the shutdown happens. And for me personally, I mean, economically, it's not good. But other places like my Canadian friends can't come here because if they do, then they're quarantined when they go back. And I thought, and I like my house and I like my family, but 24/7, I like to get out. We all got to get out, for a couple of hours a day anyway. So. Yeah, it could be worse, but we'll get through this, I think. I'm predicting that there'll be a lot of changes, both good and bad. I think, Schumpeter's idea of creative destruction in economics, but sometimes industries get kind of stuck and they're not making, and then if something, kind of knocks them out all of a sudden quickly, that's not always a bad thing, because new industries leap in to fill the void. Mm-hmm. So things like malls, malls were always kind of an inefficient way, although it's kind of a social thing, I guess. But I think a lot of those are just going to be gone. Retail stores gone. And, I'm getting quite used to having UPS bring my Amazon package pretty much every day I've ordered something. And it's like, this isn't that bad. I didn't really like going to the mall and having to find a place to park and then, walk, for 20 minutes to get to the place I wanted to go. And then they go there and they don't have my size. And, and then I am spending money on a chocolate chip cookie because Mrs. Fields is there and I should have done that. And so I think that'll be okay. A good friend of mine owns a theater and he's worried he's going to be out of, what am I going to do with this building?
Yeah.
Well, you could convert it to condos or something. And here in California, drive-in theaters are making a comeback, people in their cars. And then these food service companies are now servicing the cars, so they're making a little bit of comeback, generating revenue. So this could be good in the long run.
It's been an interesting shift. I know. I've been working from home for many years now, and I've always been wondering with the pandemic is this shift to these corporations who had this ideology of everybody needs to be in the office in order to be efficient. Well, now they can't be in the office. And they're maybe not losing the efficiency that they thought they were. So now do you get rid of your office buildings? There could be some really seismic shifts in the way that we live and we work as a result of this.
Yes, I see Google told their employees, 200,000 employees, you're going to work at home for the next year. Whoa. Now, this will be interesting for family life, too. Maybe this is good that, parents spend more time with their kids, maybe, because you can get a lot of work done and you take breaks and play with your kid and then back to work and so on. You probably need to carve out a little place in the house where it's quiet or, the kids can't come bursting in or whatever. But that's not so bad. And that's, in LA, that soul crushing traffic. God, I don't know how anybody does that. Hours a day, just sitting in your car, even if you're consuming audiobooks and teaching company courses. I do all that. But, even that, come on, it's just sitting in the car. It's just so soul crushing. That would be okay if that gets chipped away at.
I know many people who commute who'd be very happy for their commute to disappear.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, let's close it out here. Obviously, I think people can get your book pretty much anywhere that you get books, but Amazon is always a good choice for those who like who already have an account and something's already showing up tomorrow anyway.
Prime, Amazon Prime. It's a great deal. Yeah, so michaelshermer.com is my webpage. Skeptic.com is the webpage for the magazine, and tons of free content, and it's all good.
You were talking about you were talking about courses also. Are those courses available?
Oh, yeah. So I have 2 teaching company courses. This is the Great Courses. And so if you go to teach12.com or just type in the Great Courses, you'll see my courses there. It's a great company. I love that. I listen to their courses all the time. They now have an app, thegreatcoursesplus.com, where you can listen to any lectures from any of the courses. So you don't have to take the whole course. You can just bounce around in different topics. And, it's really, again, part of that shift I think we're going to go through is, right when COVID hit is like when Netflix and Hulu and, CBS, NBC, they're all, doing these online streaming platforms. And this is a great way to consume a ton of content. I can't tell you how many documentaries I've watched in the last 6 months. I don't even want to admit it. But I've really learned a lot. It's great. It's a great use of time. Even if I'm just vacuuming or whatever, yard work and whatnot, I'm listening to, some course, some lecture, and it's like, this is really great.
I love it. Just the whole kind of the podcast evolution and being able to hear, different thoughts, different ways of doing things. These are things I wouldn't go to see a lecture on these things, but the fact that I could just pop them in my headphone and listen, it's I'm in my own little bubble, safe from being challenged, but I can listen to some challenging thoughts.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have a podcast now, Science Salon, and the numbers are getting up there now. And I mean, I'm no Joe Rogan with, millions of followers, but even Joe, I love Joe's, these podcasts are just big fun to listen to when I'm out riding my bike or whatever. And I always learn something new. So I think this is a good trend.
I think it is as well. So let's wrap it up there. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Dr. Michael Shermer can be found at easypray.com/28.